It's weird how your entire sense of reality can shift because of something as small as a boarding pass. It was a Sunday morning, 2 days after Christmas. Sandra was in our bedroom packing for her annual girls' trip. This time to Vermont. I say annual, but last year it didn't happen because of scheduling, and the year before that, one of her friends supposedly got COVID. So this was the first time in 3 years it was actually happening. At least that's what I thought. I was down in the hallway closet looking for my gloves, the good ones with the leather trim, because the temperature had finally dropped below freezing, and I was planning to salt the driveway. I reached into the pocket of my heavy coat, which I hadn't worn since the end of last winter, and something unfamiliar slipped out and landed on the floor with a soft, papery whisper. A boarding pass. I picked it up, assuming it was mine. But the name printed on the ticket stopped me cold. Sandra J. Martin. Flight. Southwest 3041. Departure. January 2nd, 6:45 a.m. From LaGuardia, LGA, to Las Vegas, Las. I stared at it for a few seconds, blinking like I might have read it wrong. Vegas? That didn't make sense. She had said multiple times in front of me, her sister, and even during our awkward little Christmas dinner, that she and her friends were headed to Vermont. Skiing, wine nights, maybe a spa day. I even joked about her coming back with some overpriced maple syrup and a new appreciation for layered flannel. So why the hell was she flying to Las Vegas? I walked upstairs, holding the ticket in my hand like it was radioactive. The suitcase was open on the bed. She had one of her boots in her hand and was fitting it into the bottom compartment. There was music playing on her phone, some throwback playlist she always defaulted to when she packed. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice even. "I found this in the hallway closet." She turned. Her face didn't change right away. Not fear, not guilt, just the split second of complete stillness. Like she froze, just long enough for me to notice. Then she blinked, smiled quickly, and took the ticket from my hand like it was nothing. "Oh yeah, it's just the first leg. Layover in Vegas. You know how weird Southwest can be with flights. One of those routes that doesn't make sense." She smiled again. Too easily. I watched her turn back to the suitcase and zip up the outer pocket. "Anyway, I'm almost done packing. It's going to be freezing in Vermont. I hope I packed enough thermals." And that was it. She moved right on. Like I hadn't just pointed out something that didn't add up. Like I was just supposed to nod along and let it go. I didn't. "I thought you were flying to Burlington," I said slowly. "Isn't that where you said the rental cabin was?" "It is," she replied without looking up. "But there's a weird connection. I think I change in Vegas and then go to Denver or something. I'll show you the full itinerary later. I think Michelle booked it for all of us." She said it so quickly, so confidently, but her hands, they were fidgeting, pulling the zipper back and forth, over and over. I hadn't seen her do that in years. Not since the time she accidentally deleted a whole folder of my work documents off our shared drive and tried to pretend it was a syncing issue. "Okay," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. It just seemed weird. I mean, Vegas is a pretty long detour, right? She paused, then turned around to face me fully. And that's when her expression shifted. Not to guilt, to irritation. "Are we really doing this?" she asked. "Can we not make a thing out of nothing? It's New Year's in a few days, and I'd like to leave on a good note. Mark." Mark. My name. Spoken like a wee *p***n. I opened my mouth, then closed it. I didn't want to escalate, but I also didn't want to pretend what I saw wasn't real. "I'm not making a thing," I said. "I just noticed the ticket said Vegas. It surprised me." "Well, don't be surprised," she snapped. "I told you it was complicated routing. You never listen to the details when I explain stuff, so maybe don't act suspicious when you only hear half the story." And then she smiled again, but not kindly. It was the kind of smile someone gives when they want to end a conversation without resolving anything. I didn't say anything, just nodded once, turned, and walked back downstairs. But something had changed. It wasn't about the ticket anymore. It was how she handled it. The deflection, the fake irritation, the fact that she played offense when she knew I had caught something. felt rehearsed. I went outside and salted the driveway like I originally planned, but I don't remember actually doing it. My mind was racing the whole time. I kept thinking about how many times she'd taken little trips in the past year, conferences, marketing retreats, weekend getaways with friends. I'd never questioned them. Why would I? We trusted each other. At least I thought we did. I didn't bring it up again that day. She went about her business, finished packing, called her sister, and even double-checked her travel toiletries with a kind of cheerful energy that felt manufactured, like she was performing for someone. The next morning, I tried to act normal. She was sipping her coffee and scrolling through her phone. I was sitting across from her pretending to read emails. But all I could think about was that boarding pass. I wanted to believe her. I really did. Because if she was lying, if she was flying to Vegas for something or someone, then everything I thought I knew about my marriage was a lie too. And that's the part that got me. The ticket was bad. But the lie was effortless. Too effortless. She didn't flinch. She didn't hesitate. She even made me feel like I was overreacting. Like I was imagining it. Like I was the one creating drama right before the new year. And that scared me more than any name on a boarding pass ever could. Because if someone you love can lie that smoothly, that convincingly, with that much ease, what else are they capable of? The thing about hindsight, it doesn't whisper, it screams. And once you hear it, you can't unhear it. That night after I found the Vegas ticket, I sat in our bedroom with the TV on mute, watching her fold her clothes into neat little piles. She hummed to herself like nothing happened, like I hadn't just caught her in a lie. I stared at her, really stared, and it hit me how long it had been since she looked at me like she used to. You know that look, the one where someone actually sees you, not the face you wear every day, but you, the soul part, the human part, the part you hope still matters. But that gaze, it had disappeared a long time ago, and I hadn't noticed. Maybe I didn't want to. Maybe I couldn't bear to. I laid back on the bed, eyes on the ceiling, and started tracing memories. Not the obvious ones, not the weddings or birthdays or vacations. No, it was the small, stupid, quiet moments that suddenly rang louder than anything else. Like how, a few months ago, I caught her wiping fingerprints off her phone screen when I walked by. Not with panic, not with guilt. Just calm, casual, like it was part of her routine. Like it was muscle memory. I remember thinking, that's weird. And then I let it go. I told myself I was being paranoid. Told myself she probably just hated smudges. But I knew better. Deep down, I think I always knew. I just didn't want to face what it meant. Because once you let yourself see, it changes everything. There were other signs. So many now that I look back. She stopped hugging me before bed. Used to be, she'd tuck herself into my side, breathing slow against my chest until I fell asleep. But lately, she'd just turn away, face the wall, lights off, phone in hand, screen glowing in the dark like a secret she never shared. She stopped asking about my day. At first, I chalked it up to stress. She had a promotion earlier this year, more hours, new projects. But I started noticing how the conversations became mechanical. She'd ask how work was, but her eyes would stay on her phone. She'd nod along to my answer, but never ask a follow-up. Never engage. Eventually, I stopped telling her altogether. And the thing that really gutted me? I don't think she even noticed. Then there were the dinners. We used to cook together. Even if we were tired, we'd make a night of it. Wine, chopping vegetables, joking about how she couldn't follow a recipe without freelancing. I always loved that about her, that she made life feel less rigid, less planned. But one day that just stopped. I came home one Thursday night and she had already eaten. No warning. Just a plate in the sink, a half-empty glass of wine, and her curled up on the couch watching a show I didn't recognize. "Thought you had a late meeting," she said when I walked in. I didn't. I was home at the same time I always was. And that became our rhythm, or rather, our lack of one. No more dinners. No more Friday takeout in bed. No more weekend morning coffee chats about nothing. Just silence. Or worse, small talk. I kept trying to fix it. I bought her favorite coffee. I cleaned the house on my own. I even planned a weekend getaway in October, just the two of us. She said she couldn't get out of work. Said there was a client launch that couldn't be moved. But 2 days later, I saw her tagged in a photo at a wine tasting event with coworkers. She never mentioned it, never brought it up. When I asked her how work went that weekend, she just said, busy, no guilt, no hesitation, just the word, busy. That was her new answer to everything. And still, I told myself she loved me, that we were just in a rough patch, that things would settle. Because when you've built a life with someone, when you've shared keys and beds and holidays and inside jokes, you don't just walk away at the first sign of distance. No, you adjust, you adapt, you rationalize. And that's exactly what I did. I convinced myself that her indifference was a symptom of stress, that the late nights were work-related, that the way she shut her phone screen every time I walked in the room was just habit, not secrecy. I told myself love changes, and maybe this was just the version of it we were in now, quieter, less obvious, more adult. I mistook detachment for maturity. I mistook silence for peace. I mistook her absence for independence. But now, with that damn boarding pass burned into my mind, everything felt sharper, clearer, like someone had scrubbed the fog off a mirror I didn't realize I was staring into. I remembered a night 2 weeks ago. I had stayed up waiting for her. She came in late, after midnight, and I asked her where she'd been. Out, she said. Had drinks with the team. Lost track of time. I asked who was there. She said, the usual. I asked if Justin was there, her new mentor. The one she mentioned just enough for me to remember his name, but never with details. Never with stories. Never with context. She blinked at me, just once, then nodded. Yeah, he was there. Why? No reason, I had said. I remember the way she looked at me, not like I was her husband, but like I was a roadblock, an inconvenience, a weak spot in a narrative she was trying to keep intact. That night she slept soundly, or at least she pretended to. I laid awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, wondering if this was how it began. The slow unraveling, the hidden truths, the hollow answers. But even then, I told myself to let it go. She was tired. She was under pressure. She loved me, didn't she? Now I know what I was really doing. I was buying her more time, not just to lie but to prepare. Because when someone plans to break you, they need you calm, predictable. They need you to keep playing your part so they can rehearse theirs without resistance. Sandra didn't want me angry. She wanted me agreeable. And I was, God help me, I didn't question her new wardrobe choices. The tighter dresses, the perfume that only came out on girls' nights. I didn't question her sudden gym obsession, or the way she kept her phone on Do Not Disturb after 10 p.m. Company policy, she said. I didn't question the laughter I heard from behind the bathroom door when she took her long, late-night calls. But I should have, because love doesn't vanish overnight. It erodes quietly, piece by piece, disguised as routine. Until one day you wake up next to someone who feels like a stranger. And you realize the only reason it snuck up on you was because they made sure you were always looking the other way. I wasn't blind. I was loyal. There's a difference. And that difference, that painful, bitter difference, is what kept me from seeing the truth. She wasn't drifting. She was detaching. Strategically. Effortlessly. And I was helping her do it. I didn't confront her again after the ticket. At least not directly. Sandra left 2 days later, early in the morning, rolling her suitcase down the hallway like she always did. She kissed me on the cheek at the front door and said, "Try not to miss me too much." I nodded, told her to be safe, and even managed a small smile. But behind it, I already knew I wasn't going to miss her. I had already started checking flight logs. I found her real itinerary through our shared rewards account. I tracked the flight number listed on the boarding pass she thought I didn't look closely enough at. It didn't connect to Vermont, it was a straight sh*T to Las Vegas. No layover. No second leg. I refreshed that airline's tracking page like it was a heartbeat monitor. Then I waited. While she was in the air, I started making calls. I contacted the company that handled our home security. Asked them how quickly we could reset the alarm codes. How soon they could send someone out to update our door locks and revoke keycard access. They were fast, disturbingly fast. By noon that day, the house was no longer hers to walk into. I disabled her remote access to the thermostat, the garage, the home camera system. Every device synced to our shared cloud. I logged in and removed her permissions. I wasn't acting on rage. That's the strange part. Felt more like protocol. Like I was executing a playbook I didn't even realize I'd written for this exact scenario. And when I checked Instagram later that evening, that's when I saw it. She wasn't in Vermont. She wasn't anywhere near it. A friend of a friend, someone she forgot I still followed, had posted a story. It was dimly lit, poolside, warm string lights overhead, the sound of a pop song thumping in the background. But the video paused on a very specific moment. There was Sandra, in a black swimsuit cover-up, leaning into a man I instantly recognized. Justin, the mentor. He had his arm around her shoulder, fingers grazing the side of her neck. She was laughing into his ear like no one else existed. Like she wasn't married. Like I didn't exist. I took a screenshot. Saved it. Didn't send it to her. Didn't even think about it. I didn't need to. That wasn't the point. The point was, I knew. And she didn't know I knew. That silence? That imbalance? It gave me leverage. I spent the next 48 hours preparing for her return like a general plans for an invasion. I didn't want drama. I didn't want confrontation. I wanted control. And when her flight landed, the return leg from Las Vegas, I watched her Uber status update in real time. She was heading home. But home didn't exist for her anymore. At exactly 8:12 a.m. Monday, I watched the front camera feed from a secure link on my phone. I was sitting across town at a cafe we used to go to. Her favorite table was empty. I saw her pull up, dressed in a trench coat and heels. Her makeup was still on, but a little cracked at the edges. Her hair was done, but not fresh. She'd come straight from the airport. She approached the door with that same confidence I'd seen 1,000 times before, like she belonged here. But when she tried to open the door, her key didn't work. She stopped, frowned, tried again. I zoomed in slightly on the feed. She pulled her phone from her bag, tapped a few times. A second later, mine lit up. Sandra, mobile. Incoming call. I let it ring. She hung up, called again. I watched her jaw clench through the camera. Her hand went back to the keypad, typing in a code I changed 2 days ago. The lights blinked red. She stepped back, trying not to show panic. But it was there, in her eyes, in the way she stared at the house like it had betrayed her. She rang the doorbell. I didn't answer. Instead, I texted our lawyer and said simply, "She's locked out. Proceed." There was a plan in place. I had laid it all out with legal support. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to scream or throw things or demand explanations. I didn't want to give her that satisfaction, to play the emotional victim. She wanted me erratic, wounded, reactive. But what she got was silence. And it rattled her more than anything else could have. A few minutes later, she left. Her calls stopped. The gate camera showed her standing at the curb, arms crossed, glancing back at the house like she was hoping it would open itself to her out of pity. I didn't. She finally got into another car and disappeared down the street. I waited 20 minutes before walking back inside the house. The air felt different, cleaner, as if the house itself was relieved she hadn't made it through the door. I walked past the foyer, turned the alarm back on, and stood in the living room looking around. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. I had spent years making space for her in every corner of this place. Her books on the shelves, her coats in the hall closet, her coffee mugs lined up neatly in the kitchen cabinet. All of it still sat there, but now it looked like evidence, not presence. She was gone, but her shadow hadn't left yet. I didn't cry. I didn't collapse. I just stood there, listening to the silence she used to fill. And in that silence, I realized something I hadn't been ready to admit before. She'd already left this marriage a long time ago. I was just the last one to notice. Her trip, this lie, it wasn't a mistake. It was a reveal. And I had chosen, for the first time in a long time, to see it for what it really was. She thought the worst thing I could do was shut the door. She had no idea the door was only the beginning. Monday ended in silence. Tuesday began with action. I knew her patterns. Sandra was never the type to fall apart instantly. She unraveled in layers, like wallpaper peeling in humidity. Slowly, almost invisibly, but not to me. When she left the house that morning, or rather, when the house rejected her, her first move would have been reflexive. Try the bank. That's what people do when the walls start closing in. They reach for whatever's left to hold on to: money, status, someone to call. But I had already been there. 2 days before her flight to Las Vegas, I walked into our private banking office with every document prepared. Trust agreements, account statements, the prenup. My lawyer had everything drawn up, airtight, emotionless, precise. Joint account? Frozen. Her personal credit line? Revoked. The trust fund my parents set up? She never realized it wasn't hers to access. Sandra loved to present herself like she knew how the money worked. She'd flash her card, talk about our assets, and refer to my portfolio as ours. But she never read the fine print. She never asked questions. She thought the lifestyle was hers because she lived inside it. She never realized it was all borrowed, and I was done lending. By Tuesday morning, she would have learned that lesson at an ATM outside a downtown Chase branch, a place she thought of as neutral, harmless. I imagined her standing in line, annoyed but trying not to show it. She'd be dressed down to avoid attention. Sunglasses, ponytail, coat zipped to the chin. When it was her turn, she'd slide the card in. Type the PIN she's used for 6 years. Expect the usual sound, the count, the dispense, the welcome screen. But instead, access denied. She'd try again. Maybe she typed it wrong. But the machine didn't care. The machine simply enforced a decision she hadn't been consulted on. A decision already signed. There's a kind of fear that only shows up in quiet rejection. Not a slammed door, but a cold, invisible hand telling you, you no longer belong here. She would have stepped back from the screen, confused, checked her banking app, maybe tried to call the concierge line, waited on hold, only to hear the voice of some 24-year-old wealth associate explaining politely that access had been revoked by primary trustee authority. Me. The same voice would then inform her that any appeals must go through legal channels. That, under Clause 14 of the marital finance agreement she had signed in 2017, I was permitted to take unilateral protective action in the event of suspected fraud, commingling, or moral hazard. She wouldn't know what moral hazard meant. But I did, and that was enough. She'd hang up and panic. Next move? Call him. Justin, her so-called mentor. The one she leaned into by the pool, the one she whispered to behind bathroom doors. The one she thought could catch her if everything else fell apart. Except she couldn't reach him either. Because Justin's number was gone. Not blocked. Not silenced. Gone. She'd scroll. Try searching. Realize the thread was empty. Try his office extension. Try LinkedIn. Try anything. But nothing would work. Because here's what she didn't know. My firm does more than just investment strategy. We're a digital compliance vendor. We audit internal data trails for hedge funds, family offices, and mid-cap financial institutions, including Justin's. I never asked my team to investigate her. I didn't have to. I just asked a question. Quiet. Innocent. Hey, is anyone from the Nevada group cross-referencing sensitive client profiles with unauthorized parties? And within 48 hours, the answer came back. Yes. And they had names. Sandra's was one of them. They had used company channels to discuss private client movement. She had no idea their banter, their flirty offhand messages, were time-stamped on servers regulated by federal confidentiality laws. When my legal department saw the risk, they filed an internal memo. They flagged Justin. They didn't fire him. They made him disappear. He left without press, resigned without reason. The day after Sandra flew back, his work email bounced. His number deactivated. The Instagram account she used to stalk? Deleted. He was gone. Not because I hunted him, but because the system did what it was designed to do. She was radioactive now. Untouchable. Every network she thought protected her had quietly cut the cord. And she didn't even hear the snip. Around noon, I watched her location blip again. She'd gone back to the house. Tried the gate. Tried the keypad. Rang the bell. I didn't answer. Instead, I sent her a message through the lawyer's office. A single envelope. She received it at 3:17 p.m. Hand-delivered at the motel she'd checked into, the one with the peeling paint and no front desk. Inside the envelope, a formal notice of financial access termination. Itemized. Accompanied by a legal reminder. Any attempts to access frozen accounts would be considered violations of contract, subject to accelerated divorce proceedings with punitive terms. She wouldn't understand half the words, but she'd understand the result. She was locked out, not just from the house, from the world she thought she controlled. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like the one being left behind. I felt like the architect. This wasn't revenge. It was restraint. It was me choosing calm over chaos. And it worked, because by 6 p.m., she stopped calling. Not because she gave up, but because she realized there was no one left to call. The silence didn't last long. By Wednesday morning, she'd shifted tactics, from defiance to desperation. I saw it coming. The first few calls had been angry, filled with the kind of faux outrage people use when they've lost control and need someone to blame. By now, though, her voice had softened. Each voicemail was a little more careful, a little more rehearsed, a little more sad. The last one said, "Please, can we just talk? One dinner. 1 hour. I just want to explain." I didn't answer, but I did listen. Every word. Every pause. Every silence between the lines. And then I made a decision. She wanted a dinner? She would get one. But not the kind she expected. On Thursday morning, she received a message. No sender name. Just a clean text. Tonight, 7 p.m. Levert and Company. Formal dress. Private reservation. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't dramatic. It was hope, wrapped in the illusion of a second chance. She wouldn't be able to resist. Levert and Company was the kind of place she used to fantasize about. She once said it was where she pictured me proposing. Not that she ever told me that directly. I heard it through her sister. Sandra had a thing for symbolism, for stories that played out like movies. She wanted a full circle moment, a redemption arc. And this felt like one. She replied to the message with a single line. "I'll be there." Of course she would. By 6:30, she was already outside the restaurant, standing under the awning like a scene waiting for a cue. She wore the black dress. The black dress, the one I once told her made her look dangerous. She'd kept it for years, saving it for something important. It was one of those details that said more than words ever could. She wasn't here to confess. She was here to perform. I arrived 10 minutes later, through a private entrance. I wasn't seated at a table for two. I was seated at a long, candlelit table near the back of the restaurant. 12 seats. 11 of them filled with investors, partners, and executives, people whose time was measured in billable minutes, people who didn't dine casually. I stood as I greeted them. They weren't here for drama. They were here for transition. This dinner had been planned before Sandra ever packed her suitcase. It wasn't about revenge. It was about preparation. Legal, financial, strategic. Sandra just didn't know she had a part to play until now. At 7:04, the maitre d' approached our table and said my name. I looked up. "She's here," he said quietly. I gave him a short nod. "Send her in." I watched as he returned to the front. Watched her step past the entryway with practiced elegance. I saw the moment her smile began and then faltered, because her name wasn't on the guest list. Because the host didn't take her coat. Because no one stood to greet her. She stood there, confused, scanning the room for me. Her eyes met mine across the restaurant. And I didn't get up. I didn't wave. I didn't motion for her to come over. I just looked at her, calmly, directly, as if seeing her clearly for the first time. Her expression changed. First hesitation, then recognition. She realized this dinner wasn't for her. She didn't belong here. She started walking toward me anyway, slow, deliberate steps. But before she could reach the table, one of the partners leaned toward me and said, quietly, without even looking at her, "Do we need to pause this?" I shook my head. No. Sandra stopped a few feet away. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Not because she was choked up, but because she didn't know what to say. Not here. Not in front of people who didn't know her. Not in front of people who weren't hers to impress. She glanced down the table, recognized names, faces, clients she'd heard me mention for years, names she used to casually reference in conversations to make herself seem connected. And now, she wasn't connected to anyone in that room. I stood up, not for her, for the close of the meeting. I passed a single folder down the table, and each man and woman nodded in turn. Quiet, respectful, efficient. Sandra still stood there, waiting for a moment that wasn't coming. When I finally walked past her, she reached out. "Mark," she said, barely above a whisper. I paused, turned to her. "Not here," I said. Her eyes widened, not in shock, but in disbelief. Because until that moment, she still believed she could fix this with a look, with a plea, with a story. But this wasn't a story. It was a close, and she wasn't part of it. I left her standing there. The maitre d' offered to walk her out. She shook her head. I watched from the car as she stepped back out onto the sidewalk. Alone. No coat on. No umbrella. Just heels, a dress, and the realization that she had misunderstood everything. She had dressed for redemption. She got removed. The snow was starting to fall. Slowly, quietly, she stood under the streetlight, blinking hard, as if trying to wake up from something. And no one stopped her. Not me. Not them. Not even the story she told herself. By 9 a.m., the photo from Vegas hit a finance gossip account. Sandra in Justin's arms, poolside. Someone added side-by-sides. Our wedding photo next to hers with him. Caption: CEO's wife or corporate liability? It spread fast. By noon, industry blogs had it. Justin resigned quietly. My firm severed ties. Her inbox filled with unsubscribes, declined invitations, and silence. She tried to post a statement. It got ratioed into oblivion. Commenters didn't see a woman. They saw a warning. One said, "Maybe she should have Googled who she married." She checked into a cheap motel off the highway. A courier arrived by noon. No greeting, just an envelope. Inside, divorce terms. No alimony, no property, no trust access. A red note. No response equals acceptance. Deadline: 24 hours. Just one line for her signature. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She stared at the pen like it was the last thing tying her to the life she'd dismantled. No theatrics. No final plea. Just paper, silence, and consequences.